Homage to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. If you've listened to the meditation posted recently on the meditation at the hospital on the first profitable direction, painful practice with slow realization, then this is an example of Dhamma, not Kamma. It is where we keep the mind in a safe zone. We lean towards nibbana and what is true and undeceptive. It's useful to use the hospital setting to understand the distinction made by the Buddha between Dhamma and Kamma. To start off, all of us spend our time thinking we are attending to Dhamma when we're really caught up in Kamma. So let's look at what happens when we visit the hospital and we are not placing our minds in a sutta meditation or an insight pathway. In normal circumstances, we would look around and see all these people at the hospital and think, oh my goodness, there's so many people. Are all of these people sick? Why are they here so early? What's wrong with them? How am I going to bear with these crowds? Will I fall sick being around all these people? And then we sit down, and while we're waiting, the person sitting next to us catches our eye, or we catch their eye, and the conversation starts. What are you doing here? What is wrong? And then you go into, I'm here because my friend has this issue and it's very worrying. We didn't think there would be so many people. Fear, fear, worry, worry, lament, lament, and so on. And the person shows concern and then says, I'm here because this happened and I have this disease and this is how it has progressed, and then anger, worry, frustration, fear, and so on. And then you think to yourself, oh, that's awful. I hope that doesn't happen to me. So far I'm okay. Maybe I should go for a checkup. But what you say to the person is, I'm so sorry to hear that. How long has it been? How did it start? Who's your doctor? What have they said? Have you been to other doctors? What kind of treatment have you been through? How are your loved ones dealing with this? What is your support like? How do you feel? And so on and so forth, back and forth, or something like that. This is just an example. It could be more or less depending on how far each of us wishes to go into these things and how much we're interested. Interest means abhinandati, abhiwadati, ajosaya titati. So we take delight, express or welcome, and remain holding. So we know this from the Samādhibhāvanā Sutta. The thing is, we don't see how much we get interested in other people, in their personal story, in their personal dukkha. Being so interested in personal dukkha is a very conventional thing to do. We often consider it as showing kindness and compassion. And in a mundane sense, it probably is. It existed even before the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths. But the Buddha didn't promote this kind of thinking and talking. He didn't teach this kind of thing as the way out of suffering. So in the Vitakka Sutta, this is Itivuttaka number 80, the Buddha says, a thought concerned with sympathy for others is an unwholesome or unskilled thought. In Pali, this is para anudayata patisangyuto. So anudayata can also be translated as kindness or compassion. And along with thoughts of gain, honor, and praise, and thoughts of not wanting to be despised, such a person is said to be far from the destruction of the fetters and far from realizing nibbana. Thoughts concerning sympathy for others is also defined as one dwells in association with householders, rejoicing with them, sorrowing with them, happy when they're happy, unhappy when they're unhappy. When work arises to be done, one personally applies effort. That which is mental activity, thinking, wrong thought, connected with worldly matters. We also see this repeated when Venerable Mahākāccāna explains the Buddha's teaching in detail in the Haliddakāni Sutta. So this is Samyutta Nikāya, chapter 22, discourse number 3. And that's where he explains, in the village, the sage or the muni is intimate with none. Venerable Mahākāccāna explains that in detail by saying, again, someone lives in association with lay people, rejoices with them and sorrows with them, is happy when they are happy, sad when they are sad, and he involves himself in their affairs and duties. It is in such a way that one is intimate in the village. So the Buddha emphasizes that a sage or a muni does not do that because it leads to not being rid of sensual pleasures. It means entertaining expectations, so making plans, and getting into dispute. All the things that bind us to unskilled thoughts and ultimately to rebirth in samsara. And likewise in the Candūpama Sutta, this is Samyutta Nikaya chapter 16, discourse number 3, the Buddha encourages us to approach families like the moon, drawing back the body and mind, always acting like newcomers, courteous towards families. And of course, following on from that is the Karaṇīyametta Sutta, where Buddha says to develop metta, one is courteous, not hankering or longing to associate with families or groups. In Pali, apagabo kule suana nugido. What this all points to is when we associate closely with people, talking, finding out information and developing opinions and trading stories, our mind remains corrupted or becomes corrupted with the wrong view. What we talk about is personal stuff, personal dukkha, kamma, me and mine. It is not grounded in right view, nor a proper understanding of the First Noble Truth of suffering. Personal dukkha is not what the Buddha taught as the First Noble Truth of suffering. Personal dukkha is dukkhe attasanya, not dukkhe anattasanya. This is not saying we don't fulfill our duties and responsibilities. We do undertake and fulfill those things as best as we can. But when it comes to where it sits, it is kamma, not dhamma. Now, if you remember what the Buddha says in the Samacittavagga, so this is Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 2, discourse number 33, about how hard it is to repay one's parents, how he says even if one should carry about one's mother around on one shoulder and one's father on the other, and while doing so, should have a lifespan of 100 years, live for 100 years, and one attends to them by anointing them with balms, by massaging, bathing and rubbing their limbs, and they even void their urine and excrement there, one still would not have done enough for one's parent, nor would one have repaid them. And the same goes for if one establishes mother and father as the supreme rulers over the great earth, abounding in the 7 treasures, that would also not be enough, and one would still not have repaid them. But if one's parents lack conviction, so they lack the saddha, or they're immoral, so they do sila, or they're stingy, they have this maccharya, or they are unwise, if we encourage them in conviction, encourage them in morality or virtuous behavior, encourage them in generosity, and encourage them in wisdom, and settle them and establish them in all those things, in such a way, the Buddha says, one has done enough for one's parents, repaid them, and done more than enough for them. So what this confirms is that Dhamma, not Kamma, is encouraged by the Buddha. Looking after one's parents in the conventional sense is definitely a good thing. We do what we can as they get old and decline, and we support them. But focusing all of our efforts to help them in this way is Kamma. Many often misapprehend this part of the teaching and place all the weight on this part, thinking it will repay the debt. But Buddha says we wouldn't have done enough nor repaid the debt. And this is just our parents in this lifetime. One of the questions to ask, with reference to the Khīra Sutta in Samyutta Nikaya chapter 15, discourse number 4, is, in this samsaric journey that has no discoverable beginning, are we meant to repay all the mother's milk we have drunk? The mother's milk that the Buddha says is greater than the 4 great oceans? Think about it. What the Buddha is really telling us in Samacittavagga is if we establish our parents in conviction towards the Buddha, in virtue, generosity and wisdom, only then will we have done enough for our parents. We will have truly repaid them for helping us, bringing us up, feeding us, showing us the world. And as the Buddha ends, he says, we've done more than enough. And if you ask why, it's because Dhamma, not Kamma, is what actually helps them towards the noble path that leads to a happy destination and ultimately to complete liberation from this whole mass of suffering. So Dhamma, not Kamma. So this applies to every single thing that we attend to in our life. So if we come back to our hospital setting example, if we're sitting in the hospital trading personal stories about who, what and why we are at the hospital and indulging in sympathetic thoughts, that is dukkha atta sanya. We perceive me and mine, so the self, in dukkha. This is personal dukkha, me and mine dukkha, dukkha about kamma that is ripening in this life, talk that is not liberating or leading to liberation from this whole mass of suffering. It is not Dhamma. And if we really look at where such a conversation leads to, it leads to sadness, sorrow, lamentation, and despair, separation from what is pleasing. And what is pleasing for us is experiencing good health. Union with what is displeasing. So what is displeasing in this instance is experiencing poor health and not getting what we want. So whether we are conscious of this or not, what we want is a physical body that does not age, does not get sick, and does not die. But this is not our predicament. Now, if we wake up to this, then we start to understand the bigger predicament that all of us face, the real truth, which is anicca dukkha sanya, the perception of suffering in what is impermanent, and dukkha anatta sanya, the perception of not me and mine, so this not self, in what is suffering. In other words, with wisdom, we don't take what is impermanent, subject to change and suffering, as me and mine, as self. This is why making effort towards a sutta meditation or one of the Buddha's insight pathways is safer and more beneficial than having a conventional conversation. So if we meditate on painful practice with slow realization, we're really seeing the problem with the physical nutriment. Because the physical nutriment, this body, is impermanent, subject to change, so it ages, and it's suffering. So is it worth taking as me and mine? And the answer, of course, is no, particularly if you do that meditation. And so when you do the meditation, you reach immeasurable metta, immeasurable loving kindness, or further. So this is the example from the meditation at the hospital. And of course, there are many benefits. If we do such a meditation, we establish right view and abandon wrong view. So we activate the Noble Eightfold Path, which is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. And we abstain from misconduct that includes unskilled thoughts, and therefore we abstain from unskilled speech and any further unskilled actions. And we can spread this loving kindness to all living beings, including those suffering around us, in the hospital, and all realms of existence. There's no biases, no prejudices, no preferences. It's truly unbounded, limitless, because we've understood the First Noble Truth of suffering. And we can be at relative ease rather than fear and dread, even in a setting where it is apparent many people are experiencing pain and suffering. And we know it's very meritorious to develop loving kindness. If you recall from the Velama Sutta, so this is Anguttara Nikāya, chapter 9, discourse number 20, even developing one whiff of a mind imbued with metta, loving kindness, it's more fruitful than all those things listed in the Velama Sutta. So more fruitful than keeping the 5 precepts and taking refuge in the Triple Gem and building and offering a dwelling to the Sangha and feeding the Buddha and the Sangha and so on, including feeding arahants, feeding non-returners, feeding once-returners, feeding stream enterers and so on, and even the great offering made by Velama. And the other benefit is that if one develops liberation of mind by loving kindness, so this is in Pali, metta ceto vimutti, the Buddha says in numerous discourses, the size or measure of kamma does not remain there, does not persist there. In Pali, this is pamanakatang kamang, natang tatra avisasati, natang tatra avatitati. So that's a very strong encouragement towards the practice when kamma does not remain there, does not persist there. So those are a few of the benefits. So Dhamma, not kamma. So this is something for all of us to contemplate, whether it's in a hospital environment or another, or in daily life and the different places and situations we find ourselves in. Buddha does not encourage misapprehending personal dukkha and knowingly or unknowingly getting caught up in Kamma. We may think it is Dhamma, might even label what we think or say or do as Dhamma. But if it's concerned with personal dukkha, me and mine, then it is really Kamma. If we follow what the Buddha has said, then we know we're not meant to get caught up or make more of Kamma, whether it is perceived as ours or others. The Buddha's teaching is very much about the ending of Kamma, getting out of this entire karmic predicament. Even in the different fields of work, this is something to contemplate as well, to reflect upon. For example, if one works in a field associated with charity or assisting the underprivileged, really look at how you think about that work. How much of the thoughts are taken up with sympathy for others? How much is really sadness, sorrow, lamentation, and despair? How much is about other people's karma? And how much are we holding on to after we come home from work? And this doesn't just apply to fields of work associated with charity or underprivileged. It includes all areas of work. Then also look at the different areas of our lives: family, friends, neighbors, our social circles, sports, hobbies, things in our community, and all of that kind of stuff. The brutal truth is we knowingly and unknowingly get caught up in other people's business, their personal circumstances, their highs and lows, and we share our own. We sympathize and more. We become too interested, too vested, too intimate. There's no sense restraint. This is all Kamma. Examples in everyday things that we get caught up in are our partner's work issues, our colleagues' dramas at home or at work, our children's struggles at school and whether they'll succeed at their studies, their issues with their friends, their issues with their bodies, issues with our pets and health struggles and all their business, troubles that our parents go through, their bickering, their aging process, our own struggles with aging, sickness, and then things like construction work happening at our neighbour's house, wondering about friends who are falling out with each other, issues that are happening at the temple or the monastery, the plight of poor people during hard economic times, the plight of stray animals in the neighbourhood, the plight of any underdog group in the world, the plight of those affected by natural disasters, war, famine, and more. What we think will happen to corrupt politicians and their families, what we think about conspiracy groups and what they say about worldly matters, what the doctors say about the current and next pandemic, what people say about royalty or the elite groups, who will win what awards in the arts, in the sports, wondering about different Dhamma teachers, getting all up in other people's business about it. This is all Kamma. So Dhamma is saying, na binandati, na biwadati, na josaya titati. Again, this is from the Samādhibhāvanā Sutta. So we don't take delight, we don't express or welcome, and we don't remain holding to any of this karmic predicament. We don't make more of it. Dhamma is going against conventional practices and norms. Dhamma is going against the stream, as the Buddha would say. So when you understand this, then you know and understand why it is important and beneficial to make some effort and put aside some time to meditate on these sutta meditations or these insight pathways, such as painful practice with slow realization, or cultivating metta by using the insight pathway in Karaṇīyametta Sutta, and many more meditations that we've learned. This is what the Buddha would encourage for those willing to follow the Buddha's teaching, so those who are suvacha, easy to instruct. A trainee or learner, a seka in Pali, who does this gets to experience happiness in this life and true mindfulness with clear comprehension, because this part of the Dhamma can be understood. So this is an encouragement to really look at Dhamma, not Kamma. Don't spend so much time on Kamma. And really look at whether you understand the distinction, because it can make a huge difference to the way that one practices, to what you prioritize, and to how you make progress. And one additional thing to just emphasize, this is not about abandoning our duties and responsibilities. We definitely do them, but we do them with wisdom. We adopt wisdom, this prudence, this real understanding of the distinction between Dhamma and Kamma. So we spend our time wisely, because it is Dhamma that leads to the way out of this whole mass of suffering. So take what is useful, and we can end this session here. May all beings be happy and well. May all beings be free from suffering, sharing all the merits. Wishing you well. Blessings of the Triple Gem. Teruwan Saranai.